Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Gravesdale. I'm a solution engineer at PDFTron. And so today, what we're going to do is kind of talk about PDFTron's web viewing technology and how that can be used to streamline review and approval workflows within an application. So, we're going to be talking about WebViewer in general. So, any questions you might have about that piece of our technology or about anything to do with PDFTron's technology stack, I'm happy to answer. I think what we'll do today is try to put more of the questions towards the end, just so that we can sort of talk through some of the different review and approval workflows that PDFTron offers, just to make sure that we have a chance to cover that off. But we definitely want to be able to get to everyone's questions as well. So please do feel free to post that, and then we'll kind of address that when we reach that point in the webinar. So I just wanted to kind of start off with a bit of background about PDFTron in general. So PDFTron was founded in the late 90s, right around the time that the PDF specification was first published. Our initial code base was a native one for Windows initially, for working with PDF documents. And the functionality within that toolkit really expanded over the years to provide solutions around the full gamut of the document lifecycle. So, that includes sort of the birth of documents, the beginnings of the document lifecycle, where we might create a document from scratch, at a low level, sort of building up, say, a PDF document or another kind of document from scratch, or converting from another file type like images or Office documents or XPS into PDF. So our functionality includes other things as well, like kind of the improvement stage, or the sort of growing up of documents, doing things like merging different documents together or removing pages from it, optimizing files to make them smaller, or flattening them to make them simpler. We have functionality around kind of the everyday usage of documents. So things like viewing PDF documents, annotating them, adding values into form fields, or swapping out text based on placeholders. And then we have a lot of functionality around kind of the finalization of documents as well. So whether that's redacting information so that you can remove personally identifying info or confidential information, and then disseminate a document more widely. Conversion to archive formats like PDFA, or digital signatures, which are a kind of special signature that we'll talk about in more detail later in the webinar. Ones that enable you to see if a document has been modified after having been signed. So we'll kind of cover off some of that functionality a bit later, because what we've done is we've ported that functionality to a variety of native platforms, like Windows and Linux, Mac OS, as well as mobile platforms like iOS, Android, and UWP. But we've also ported that same gamut of functionality over to the web. So what we've done is taken that same code base and compiled it over to JavaScript, so that we can run it entirely inside of the browser without having to rely on any server-side components, or without the user having to install anything natively in the client side, like plugins or applets or anything like that. So by running it entirely inside of the browser, we get the ability to address a lot of different use cases, while still having a web-based UI that's integrated into the rest of one's web app. And additionally, our technology can interoperate with the other platforms that we support. So in addition to web-based clients, you can have mobile apps or native desktop applications or server-side applications that all use the same APIs as the rest of our technology, and thus makes it easy to choose wherever you'd like certain kinds of processing to occur. So what I'm going to do is go to our demo, and that's available here from pdftron.com. So I can get to that very easily just by going out of these menus at the top here. And if I go to documentation, web, and then launch demo, that will actually bring up our live web viewer demo here, just in another tab. And because WebViewer is JavaScript running entirely inside of the browser, that makes this demo a great way to test out PDFTron's functionality. So you can do things like upload your own files and see how they render inside of the browser. And since we're running purely client-side as well, you can test this out in whatever environment with whatever browsers your users might happen to employ. So, if your users make use of IE a lot or mobile browsers on mobile devices, then this demo is a great way to try out what that functionality is actually like for those end users. You can try it a variety of file types as well. So besides supporting PDFs directly inside of WebViewer, we can also load up Office documents. DocX, PPTX, and XLSX are file formats that we can actually load up directly from inside of WebViewer. For additional file types, what we can do is bring those to a server-side component that we have that can convert them into PDF, and then once they're in PDF, we can render them here in the browser. We can also directly render image files. So you can load up TIFFs or JPEGs or PNGs directly inside of WebViewer. And additionally, we have some CAD support as well. So by leveraging our native CAD conversion tool server-side, you can convert a variety of CAD formats into PDF for viewing inside of the browser. The exact file list is available from our documentation, which is actually a great thing to go to as a next step after this webinar. And after checking out our demo, you can also go here to Overview from Documentation Web on our site. And then from here, you can find a lot of our guides around different use cases, as well as ways to download WebViewer, or especially how to get started with different frameworks. So if you are developing a web app in React or Angular or Vue, then you can find instructions for how to get set up with those directly. And the same is true for all of our toolkits as well. So for example, on Windows, if you had particular languages that you were using or different kinds of frameworks, our guides kind of walk through all of that. And as well, I think I sort of got onto this tangent by talking about our CAD functionality. With regards to that, you can find a full listing of the file types that we support from here in our documentation. So one thing that really sets WebViewer apart from other solutions for viewing documents, especially on the web, is that we're rendering the document itself directly inside of the browser. We're not doing something like sending the PDF off to a REST API or a SaaS service or anything like that to be rendered. Rather, what's happening is the JavaScript code inside of the browser is downloading bytes of the PDF, and then inside of the browser itself, it's rendering that PDF into an image and then showing this image here to the user. And that means that we have quite a lot of functionality available in the browser that's just wouldn't be available with other approaches. So if we were, for example, just rendering to an image and then sending that down to the browser, we might not have access to text that we can select and copy out to the clipboard, or that we could search through. So I can search for the word PDF inside of this document, and it's just like searching with a native application. And I can even get a list of all the search hits inside of the document, along with ambient text and the ability to jump right to the different search hits inside of the document. I can also customize the way I'm searching, so I can enable some wildcard searching or options like case sensitivity and whole word searching as well. And in addition to that, because I've got actual text, I can, once selecting it, actually add annotations on top of it as well. So for example, I could highlight some text inside of a document and create a PDF annotation here directly inside of the file. And this is really what we're going to be talking about a lot in terms of review and approval workflows. We're going to be talking about collaborating between different users, and the way that collaboration happens is by annotations made on top of PDF copies of the document. Now, when you're making annotations inside of WebViewer or any of PDFTron's technologies, there are a couple of different ways of saving that data. So you could, for example, just save annotations directly into a new copy of the document. And in fact, if I click download here and download this document to my local machine and open it up, we see that the annotation actually is included onto the document itself. Here on the fourth page, it seems where I've put it. And And so it's directly added onto the PDF document as a standard PDF annotation, and that's certainly one way to manage saving new annotations onto a document. But it's not an approach that we would recommend. And the reason why is that if you're creating a new copy of the document after every time an annotation has been changed, then you're quickly going to really balloon the amount of file storage that you need to support all of these changes. So what we recommend instead is to keep annotation and form field information saved separate from the underlying document whenever possible. So as long as somebody is not exporting a document from the system, if they're just still viewing the document and scrolling through it and reading it, there's really no reason I have to create an entire new copy of the document. What I can do instead is take advantage of WebViewer's ability to save annotations and form fields as XML. Specifically, it's an XML format called XFDF that's used throughout the PDF industry. It's an ISO standard, I believe, at this point, and is used in many other standard PDF tools. For example, Acrobat can import XFDF annotations into a PDF. And so what we do is we make use of XFDF to share annotations between different users. And by doing so, you can have multiple users collaborate on the same document. So let me let's kind of show that off a bit here. So I'm just going to change how I'm sharing my screen here. Because what I'm going to do is bring up two different documents. And I'm going to one second here. So what I'm going to do is to bring up two different browsers and show the same document in each of those. So here in our demo, if I click on Collaborate in Real Time and bring up this demo, this will give me a URL that I can copy and view in another browser. So I'm just going to copy this one out and then copy it over to this other browser here. You'll see that I'm viewing the same document. Now, what WebViewer has done is automatically assigned a username to each of these users, just so that we can see what it's like for different users to collaborate on the same file. So here, let's see, this first user maybe is noticing that there's something wrong with this copy here on this document. So maybe they're adding a circle over this and saying, let's review this further. Let's see the comment here. So this Keel user can say, let's review this wording. Say that maybe this title needs to be revised or something along those lines. And then this other user can come in and see that same comment immediately show up because what we're doing is sharing the XML version of this annotation between different browsers. Now, the way this particular sample is set up is that we have a just sort of a demo server in our environment that's set up just for this showcase to share annotations between browser instances. So it's a Node.js server, and it makes WebSocket connections to each of these browsers and uses that to transfer XML versions of the annotations between each of these browsers and enable this kind of collaboration. But you can use whatever kind of infrastructure you like. We've crafted WebViewer to be as flexible as possible, and all of this annotation sharing functionality is simply enabled through events that are raised whenever annotations are created or modified. And we have actually some sample code around that through GitHub. Here on PDFTron's GitHub page, we've posted the source code for how we're doing this kind of collaboration between different browsers. And so essentially what we have is a Node.js server sitting in our own server environment that has WebSocket connections to each of these browsers and is simply saving the XML into a SQLite database, just as a string. So this is a pretty useful kind of starting point for bootstrapping this kind of collaboration in your environment. And the sample code is quite simple, so it's very easy to modify this to provide more complicated workflows. For example, if you had multiple users who had a scenario where they work together as a group and maybe need to share annotations amongst them, but other users who don't want to see those annotations or shouldn't be allowed to see those annotations, you can configure it so they will not be delivered them, and for them it's as if those annotations don't exist. So with that way, you can really tailor however your users would like to work and build workflows around that so that they can send messages to each other back and forth. So I'm just going to rework this sharing again. 1 second. So I can go back to sharing just one screen. So that's the basic method by which our collaboration can be used to share annotations between different users. We see much similar functionality here in this demo here. So what we're going to do is use this to kind of switch between virtual users who might be viewing this document and sharing annotations on top of it. What WebViewer is doing when switching between different users is simply resetting itself with different annotation users. So when you're configuring someone as being the person annotating a document inside of WebViewer, that's just set up with this API call here, where we call set annotation user for a given string. It's just meant to be as flexible as possible. We've designed WebViewer so that it doesn't manage anything to do with users or authentication or anything along those lines. Rather, it's meant to be able to integrate with whatever user management system or security or authentication system you already have running, just as with document management as well. So, with WebViewer, it's not managing the storage of any documents or anything along those lines. Rather, it's able to read PDFs from whatever URL or REST endpoint you happen to give it, or it can load up documents from memory streams as well. So when it comes to managing users or managing documents, WebViewer is meant to just be a toolkit that fits in with whatever infrastructure you already have. So in here, we're logged in now or set up as the Sally user. So let's say that Sally creates another annotation on top of here, and then extracts the text. And so Sally is able to go in and say, wording looks good. Me, what do you think? Sally can come in and make that annotation, and then other users as well can come in and reply to that same comment thread. So for example, this Justin user can say, I think it looks good. And essentially, an entire comment thread can be made around this location in the document. And this kind of collaborating on specific areas of a PDF page is very useful. What a lot of solutions provide is just a discussion thread around a document as a whole, but that really hinders the ability to collaborate effectively on the actual content on the page, because the discussion is really divorced from the actual issues that are being debated. So what we find is it's a much richer user experience to be able to anchor a given conversation at a location on a page. And that's especially true because each of these annotations in a review and approval scenario, each of these is a task for these users. Really, this is kind of how they go about their day. Each of these annotations that are present, are things that need to be reviewed, need to be gone through and double checked. And so, with that in mind, what we've done in our latest iteration of WebViewer is add the ability to set states on each of these annotations. So, as we saw, Sally went in and highlighted some text and said, could you please review this further? So what we can do actually is set up statuses for the annotation to kind of record where we are in this review and approval workflow. And by default, we have a few states like accepted or rejected or canceled. But those are just default states, and we have APIs for going through and creating your own custom statuses and adding those onto the annotation instead. So that way, if you have a particular kind of workflow that needs to be followed, what you could do is set custom states for that, and kind of you can imagine it being a bit of a flow chart. Each of the states in that flow chart, you can record inside of this annotation state, and that way really get a good idea of where each of the tasks is. And you can even filter our comments here in WebViewer based on the annotation state. So if you had a user and you wanted to see all of the open issues that they might need to review, that way you could really slim down what each user happens to see and streamline the user experience. And just a bit about that overall, WebViewer is made to be as flexible and as customizable as possible. We actually have the full UI source code of WebViewer posted to GitHub as well. So if there's anything about WebViewer's UI that you'd like to change to make things easier for users or to streamline things for them, that's all possible. Ultimately by forking the UI, if we don't have any sort of customization API that works for whatever change you'd like to make to the UI. But that said, we do have a lot of customization UIs that make it very easy to do things like remove buttons or other elements. For example, if we wanted to get rid of the download or print buttons, those are quite easy to do just with a single API call. Or the ability to select text, or if there are certain annotation tools that we want to remove to make things a bit easier, less confusing, then that's certainly doable as well. And each of these annotations as well can be customized. So if we wanted to create multiple kinds of highlights, that might be possible. So why you might do something like that would be to basically create a different kind of highlight for each task that you want to have. So for example, you can have green text for text that you think should be approved, or yellow text that might need review, or red text that should be rejected. So you could create custom highlights based around this, and that might be a bit easier for end users to understand that if they need to create a particular task, that means that they should create a particular annotation. And overall, we find that this really makes it more of a collaborative, kind of a discussion-based workflow around these documents. To enable that as well, we've also, in the latest version, added support for using @signs. So we don't actually have this live in this demo here, but the basic idea is that we have some APIs inside of the latest release of WebViewer, where you can register different strings for @sign mentions, and different callbacks that can be triggered when one of those @sign mentions is actually added into a comment. So what that means is that you can say @sign Sally or @sign Brian, and then WebViewer can trigger that callback to alert those users that they've been mentioned in a given comment. And that way, if there are lots and lots of tasks on a given document or lots of annotations, you can really slim things down and jump right to those annotations that are most relevant to you. The styling of these is quite customizable too. So I mentioned changing the color potentially, so like red for some scenarios, or changing the opacity based on the ability to see the text underneath. And additionally, we have free text annotations too. So in those, we can, say like, let's review the text of this page. And in recent releases, we've added a lot of text styling abilities here too. So in addition to changing the color, you can also make it bold or italic or underlined. And as well, you can change the text size as well. So if you want to make larger text or smaller text, or change the thickness of borders or the opacity of the background, all of that is quite possible with our toolkit. So we have these flexible UI tools built in, but really you can change this annotation appearance to be whatever you'd like. So if there are some requirements around making annotations that look a particular way, that's quite possible. So I just saw inside of the chat that there was a question about font size. So you definitely can change the font size within a free text annotation. That is quite possible. So let's see. So that those are kind of the basic elements of some of our review and approval workflow, but it's something that we've extended throughout WebViewer. And so so what I'm going to do is kind of go into a couple of the scenarios and features that really show this off inside of WebViewer. So one of those actually is a pretty cool one. Just staying with annotations here. Just going to bring up this window here. That shows off WebViewer's video annotations. So what we've done is we've taken that same mechanism that I was showing before, and we've added it so that we can or modified it so that we can add them on top of video content. So here in this demo, what I've shown is we just have a video. It's an animation here, and what we can do is, on certain frames, add annotations on top of it. So let's say that here inside of the document, we noticed that something was incorrect about this frame here. So what we might want to do is take a cloudy annotation and simply point that out for later review. And as we see, it's created a placeholder here at this point in the video, and it's made a comment here so that we can say, this looks distorted. That way anyone coming through and reviewing this video, maybe looking for open issues or things that need to be reanimated, can simply jump directly to that content and see exactly what's going wrong with that content in there. And that way multiple users could collaborate on a single video and kind of review all of it to see if there are any rendering mistakes or any other issues that need to be looked into or edited out. And really, this is just another way of showing how WebViewer's annotation and collaboration capabilities can be applied to a lot of different scenarios. So not just document review, but in this case, video as well. And that's something that is available on our site. So if you go to PDFTron.com, you can download our video annotation build of WebViewer. And that has setup instructions for getting started right away with loading and reviewing video within your own environment. Now, in addition to just reviewing documents, we hear a lot about review and approval scenarios in terms of reviewing forms and contracts. So things that need to be really looked over before they're signed. Maybe different stakeholders like attorneys need to review a given document and really check that a form has been filled out correctly. So just with regards to PDFTron's form filling, so it's a very full-featured PDF form filling experience. It's similar to what you might find with a native application like Zoto. And what we can do is go in and interactively fill out the document. So for example, I could type in my first name here. We actually see in this demo, what this is showing is that WebViewer can automatically extract any values that you've placed into a form field here. So in this case, it's automatically detecting the low-level name of this form field inside of the PDF. And it's found that I've typed in the name Aaron. And it's just putting that into a JSON object here. And the reason we really want to highlight the ability to do something like that is that being able to automatically extract values from the form field or add values into a form programmatically is quite a powerful one. You can, for example, use this to bootstrap the pre-population of forms. So for example, there might be a back-end system that has a database with information about users. And so it might have first and last name in there. And so if someone types in Aaron, you might be able to guess that, this must be Aaron Gravedale, and then you could go back to the database and grab things like social security numbers or addresses and other values to populate this form automatically. And that's a very powerful thing to do, not just in terms of time savings, because now I don't have to type everything in manually, but in terms of error correction as well. Because if I'm just going back to the database and putting values in straight from the database, I can be pretty confident that those values are correct, unlike someone typing it in which case, I might run into spelling errors or digits might be transposed. And depending on the document, like we're seeing this as an income tax return, there might be pretty dire consequences to filling out a PDF filing return incorrectly. So that's something that's of quite a bit of interest to some of our users. And we have support for other standard PDF form features, checkboxes, drop downs, and signature fields. We have in one of our gallery documents kind of a more rich form sample that shows off some of the advanced features we support. So you can do things like auto calculate values inside of a PDF form. List boxes, hiding or showing different fields, or the ability to reset back to an original value. Of course, things like checkboxes and radio buttons. Required fields, so text fields that have to have content, or validatable fields as well. So, for example, I might have the need to add an email address into a form field, and we can automatically validate that with JavaScript associated with this field. And we see that if it is a valid email address, then no pop-up message listing that error is given. Now, just to clarify a bit of this, so when we're saving off this information into XFDF, and form field values, just like annotation values, can be saved into XFDF, that's an XML document. So you could save that on the back end as a separate file, but another option is to save it as one would any other kind of text value. So for example, if you have a SQL database and wanted to store the XFDF in a varchar column of a SQL database or a text column, that's entirely possible to do. In fact, I believe our GitHub sample that saves annotations into the backend actually works that way. So if we dig into that code, what we can see is that in the annotation handling, it's actually inserting XFDF into a table called annotations that has the document ID, the annotation ID, and the XFDF string as text inside of that database. So when you're saving XFDF, you could save that as a separate file, or you can save it back into a SQL database. And so that's why I would recommend taking a look at this sample as a good starting point. It really builds a nice foundation for for enabling collaboration. And a lot of that collaboration can happen on forms as well. What we see a lot of with review and approval workflows with form filling is typically around making sure that various parts of the wording are reviewed and that different form fields are actually signed by users and that none of them are missed. So we've already seen a bit of some of our collaboration workflow. So for example, if I were reviewing some text on a form and I really wanted others to pay attention to it, I could highlight that and then use @mentions to alert others to this annotation and that they should take a look at it. Maybe set the annotation state to reject it or something like that. So all of that helps with reviewing the different text on top of a given form. But additionally, I can do things like point out to users that they should sign in certain areas. So for example, I might make a highlight annotation on this sign here, and I should say, sign here. And that gives a very easy way to alert specific users where they should sign within a document. So if there's some field they absolutely need to go to and make sure to add a signature into, you can kind of make sure that they have done so. And after they do so, it would be possible for them to click completed to signal that area has been signed, or you could automatically do so after they actually sign the annotation, or actually sign the form field rather. Another kind of useful technique is our strike-through annotations as well. So in addition to highlighting, we have underlining and squiggles, and also this strike-through. And this is very useful when reviewing contract language. So for example, I can select text, and that strikes it out here directly on top of this contract. And one thing I can do is customize this kind of annotation to do additional things as well. For example, if there were a need for me to add my initials next to this annotation every time that I add any strike-through text, that's possible too. So I could simply customize this existing annotation so that I could add initials always next to any sort of strikeout changes that I've made. And that way, any modifications on a document are always guaranteed to be initialed. And if that's a requirement for my review and approval of my contract, then that's one way to ensure that always happens and that always takes place. Now, just adding initials onto a document is kind of one way of signing it. It's very similar to an e-signature, where basically what I'm doing is just taking the appearance of my signature, sort of the squiggles that I've made, and stamping that appearance onto some sort of document as a way of essentially signing it. And that's one workflow that's used in many different legal environments. But in some environments, it's also very useful to support digital signatures, which are slightly different than e-signatures. So e-signatures, again, are just the appearance. But a digital signature is one where a hash of the document is embedded inside of the signature as well. And so a hash of the document is made from the document's contents. And if the document's contents were to change, then that hash would change as well. So by embedding a hash of the document's contents into the digital signature, I can see immediately if the document has been modified since it's been signed, because that hash will be different. If the contents are different, then the hash is different. And so I'll be able to say, oh, this document was modified after it was signed. Therefore, that signature is invalidated, because that wasn't the document they signed, the one I have in front of me. Something has changed in there. Maybe someone went in and added a zero into how much I have to pay, or something along those lines. So, since somebody's modified that document, it's no longer valid that I have signed it. I'm no longer bound by this document. And PDFTron's library supports digital signatures on PDFs. You can apply true digital signatures onto the document. You can make multiple ones. So if you have multiple form fields on a document and multiple people who need to sign, you can absolutely support multiple digital signatures on that PDF. We also support a kind of digital signature called certification signatures, and those are ones that apply to the document as a whole. And that makes for very useful workflows where you can have users just make e-signatures on the document, and then at the end perform a certification signature on the entire document after all parties have actually signed. So if you're the provider of a signing workflow for a group of users, that way the certificate management is much easier. So as the provider of that signing workflow, what I can do is create a signing certificate for myself, and then I can have my users just make squiggles on the document to say that they've signed it. And then I can make a certification signature on top of the document saying I authenticated those users, those signatures that they made on top of the document are valid. And if the document is ever modified, that would invalidate the certification signature and essentially invalidate the contract. So it's a very easy workflow to work with. Since you don't have to assign certificates to every user, you just need one as the signing provider. So that's a very useful workflow. And if you're thinking about providing signing services directly inside of your app, so that users can digitally sign, as part of your application without calling out to third-party document signature services, that's a useful way to go. So something to think about if you are planning on going down that route and offering signature workflows. Now, someone was asking, once the annotation is stored into a database, when you edit it, will it create a new one in the database or just an update of the same one? And now remember, the way that annotations are stored in the backend is something that's entirely up to you. So this sample is available on GitHub with full source code. So however you'd like it to behave in the backend is entirely under your control. So whether you want to simply overwrite whatever annotations are existing, or whether you want to keep sort of a history of annotations so that users can jump back in time, that's entirely up to you and depends on your users' requirements and needs. One other workflow that I kind of wanted to touch on before wrapping things up is redaction. So inside of PDFTron's web viewer, because we have the full PDF here inside of the browser's memory, that means that we can edit it at a low level. We can do things like take multiple documents and merge them together, or remove pages, or edit text, or do lots of other kinds of low-level editing of PDF documents. But one thing that really comes up a lot is the ability to redact documents inside of WebViewer. And the reason that redaction is really attractive from inside of WebViewer specifically is that because WebViewer runs entirely inside of the client-side browser, that means that if I'm redacting something from inside of WebViewer, I don't have to transfer that document over the network at all. So here, let's assume that this document is a very sensitive one, one that's very confidential and that I don't want to have leaked out anywhere. So the idea of sending that across the network is going to be a very scary one for me. I don't want to upload this to a redaction service or anything that would transmit it over the network, because I don't know where that's going to. Maybe this is going abroad somewhere, and now I'm transmitting sensitive information overseas. Or maybe just the very exposure of this document to a larger network is something that's risky for me. So with WebViewer, one big advantage here is that I'm not transferring this over the network at all. I can just open up a document locally and then bring it up inside of the browser to edit, to remove information from it. Now, when redacting, there are some subtle issues that come up with ways of redacting. What WebViewer does is it will go through the PDF document at a low level and remove any content fully from the document that shouldn't be there. So here, for example, we want to remove this ABC Widgets Incorporated and Transworld Banking, as well as this dollar amount here. So if I were to click Apply Redactions, what that will do is go through at a low level inside of the PDF and actually totally remove any of that text that's underneath that redaction area. And what it's done is after wiping that out of the document, it's overlaying it with a purple rectangle here, just so they can see that there used to be something at that location. And that makes it a bit easier to understand rather than just a blank space. But I should note that this approach of actually fully removing the text from the underlying document is one that not all redaction solutions go with. So some of them, for example, will just overlay a rectangle over the content. It won't actually remove what's underneath. And that's a bit problematic because these rectangles like this inside of a PDF are something that can be removed. You can go through at a low level and remove objects like that from the PDF page. The other thing is that when you're rendering a PDF document, you'll see the older content first, and then you'll start to see newer and newer content rendered on top of it. Now, if it's a fast rendering engine like this one, because this one is running very quickly in the browser here, this is our code that we've made sure can run quite performantly. We're not seeing any sort of lag between the text and then these rectangles. But if you run a very slow rendering engine or run on a very slow machine, then you would be able to induce that kind of behavior where you first see the text and then maybe a second or two later, that black rectangle is shown over it. So that can be a big security hole if you use less advanced redaction tools. Ones that don't actually remove the content from the underlying PDF, ones that just overlay a black rectangle, that can be a big security hole. Another thing to watch out for is the approach of just taking the entire PDF page and converting it into a big image and then blacking out content on top of it. That approach does actually remove the content from the document, which is great, but unfortunately it does so by converting the entire rest of the page into an image. So now, if we had a screen reading solution or something along those lines that took the selected text and read it so that disabled users or users who had vision problems could still hear the text of the content being read aloud and make use of it. For those users, that would be destroyed if the page were just converted into a big image. So that's why what we do is we remove the content that should be removed, and we keep the existing content that shouldn't be redacted. We keep that as is, so that it's still searchable and still has accessibility information. Now, going back to kind of the steps of this workflow, what we're doing is first making annotations over areas that we think should be redacted. And the reason why is that a lot of times it's a good idea to kind of review these with multiple users. So different users might have a different idea about what is actually sensitive information. If you're going through, say, an e-discovery process or some sort of process where multiple users need to review the content to really validate whether it's something that should be redacted or not, that way different users can collaborate on it. Or also you can search for different text and automatically add highlights. So let's say I wanted to search for the number 1313. That's here in this document, and it's automatically added an annotation around it as a kind of suggested area that could be redacted. So then another user could come in, validate whether that's correct or not, and then burn in the redaction if it's something that actually should be made permanent. And different users can do much the same thing here as well. We can go through on an annotation by annotation level and either remove or actually eradicate that content. So the sum total of all of these things is that with WebViewer, you can create and guide workflows on a document level so that multiple users can go in and collaborate on the same pieces of content on the same document. And really streamline and reduce errors with that process. So I wanted to jump into some of the questions that we have. And please do feel free to post more if there's anything I didn't cover that you'd like me to discuss, or anything that you'd like more details about. Please let me know. So one of the questions was, is there a way to use readline or polyline geometry information from PDF files, that is PDFs, which are exports from CAD software? So certainly you can, in some cases, make use of that information. So for example, we actually do that when it comes to our annotation snapping. So what we can do is, when we're working with a PDF document that has control point information inside of it, we can extract those points from inside of the PDF document and use that to snap to different locations. I think we have a measurement tool actually where that's maybe a little easier to see that in action. So here, for example, if I make a distance measurement, it might be a little hard to see, but I'm kind of snapping to different control points inside of the PDF. And these are the points that it's using to snap to are things like the end points of different polygons inside of the PDF. And it can do things also like extrapolate midpoints or find other snap to points as well. So that's certainly one way in which we're going about extracting low-level information from CAD files and using them to improve the user interface of WebViewer. Someone else is asking, do these same features exist in mobile and desktop? And certainly they do, yeah. So, again, our WebViewer SDK was created by compiling our native PDFTron SDK over to JavaScript. So that same code base still exists for other native platforms. So for things like iOS and Android, Windows, macOS and Linux, those are all available for download from our website as well. And you can find the same guides that we have for WebViewer for other platforms too. So if you want to do the same functionality on Windows, headlessly in the back end, or maybe in a desktop application, or if you want to provide the same kinds of collaboration and document viewing on an iOS device or an Android device, that's all certainly possible as well. Someone was asking about document comparison and how to do the comparison of two documents inside of the viewer. And they point out in the question that our existing samples are around pixel by pixel comparison. So just so that we're all on the same page, that sample is available here. And what we're doing inside of this sample is we're bringing up two versions of a document. So we have two test documents in here. We're bringing up one inside of one instance of a web viewer, one inside of another instance of a web viewer. And then we're doing a pixel by pixel comparison between the two and showing that here in this middle web viewer instance here. And the idea is that we can use that to very easily see changes within a document. So here, text that's been added between these two versions shows up as blue, and any text that's been removed now shows up as red. And so that's very useful, especially on, say, CAD documents or things like that, to see, exactly where two files may have changed. This is quite customizable as well. We have the source code posted, so you can tweak this to do things like use a different kind of pixel comparison. So if you wanted to, for example, not highlight with different colors, but instead just change the opacity of text, that's possible. And we have also this nudge tool that's pretty cool too, that lets you minutely adjust the comparison. So in case you have two versions of the document and they're slightly misaligned, let's say, let's say that one is a faxed version and one of them is your existing version, and maybe the alignment of the two is slightly off. Then you can use this nudge tool to make fine-grained adjustments to the rotation or scaling or position of that comparison. But the question, getting back to the original question, was, do we have anything that's based around text? And so you'll notice this is pixel by pixel in terms of its comparison. But if we were dealing with text documents where content was shifted down, instead of leaving this placeholder here, then all the content would appear different after that change. So as a result, based on that feedback, we are in the process of developing a built-in text-based compare. And that's something that will be released in future versions of WebViewer, assuming that everything goes well. That said, you can bootstrap your own text-based comparison with WebViewer out of the box. WebViewer does have built-in text extraction capabilities. So if I want to grab the text from a PDF document, like this is the 508 legislation, and here we see it's automatically been extracted from this document. So it's quite easy to grab a document's text from inside of WebViewer, and then you could put that into, say, a third-party document text comparison tool, of which there are multiple online. So that could certainly be an approach as well. But we will we're definitely planning to try to have a text-based comparison out of the box fairly soon here. See, someone else was asking, can you show us how much of 3D PDF is supported? How are DWG and CAD files rendered? Is it by converting them to PDF and then showing them? And so our CAD conversion currently does do exactly that. It converts DWG, BGN, DXF, DWF, or RVT files into a two-dimensional version. So if they're already, two-dimensional drawings, then we can just convert that directly into PDF. Or if we're talking about 3D content, like an RVT file, we convert that into a two-dimensional copy, similar to if you were printing the RVT file. That said, we're hoping to add support for 3D PDF, so something more interactive. But that's not something we yet have available out of the box. And let's see, there was a remaining question on digital signatures and asking if there was anything more with digital signatures that could be shown. One kind of additional feature that I would like to point out is that inside of WebViewer, because you have low-level access to the PDF document itself, it's possible to add new form fields onto a document too. So if we wanted to add a new signature field onto a file, we could do so. And then actually burn that in, so it's a true PDF digital signature field here. And I can go in, and if I click Sign here, that will bring up a dialog box inside of WebViewer where I can either draw my initials, or I can type initials into a box here, or my signature into a field here. And what this is doing is creating an e-signature within this field. But I could, inside of WebViewer, also make that a true digital signature as well. And we have samples for that out of the box. It's not something that I can really visually demo here so much because it's just adding a signature onto a document. But that is something that's available within our toolkit. And if you'd like to know more, our WebViewer guides on this are a good place to get started. So here we have a digital signature section, and then we talk about some of the different ways of signing. Like I talked about how we had the ability to sign multiple digital signatures tied to fields, or to make a certification signature across the entire document. Whatever fits best with your workflow. So I think if there are no more questions, I think that brings us right to the top of the hour. And if you do want a recording of this webinar, that will be available after the webinar ends, the Livestorm email should go out with links to the recording of this webinar. And if you have any other questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. If you go to PDFTron.com and go to support and resources, we have a variety of ways of getting help from us, but probably the best one if you're just looking at evaluating our toolkits at all and just have any other questions, this trial tech support one is the one to fill out, and that will go directly to our team, and we'll be happy to work with you throughout the entire evaluation process. If you have any questions or any roadblocks or anything like that, we're absolutely happy to help guide you through that so that you're able to get up and running with WebViewer. So please do reach out to us, and thanks so much for attending this webinar today. I hope it was informative, and yeah, thanks again.